Midweek Pictorial, June 3, 1920. Press agent stunt that had the merit of novelty when a lion was smuggled into a New York hotel May 24th. The proprietor is said to have first learned of his presence by the call over the phone for 15 pounds of raw beef. The lion was promptly evicted. Members of the National Woman's Party, who recently heckled Chairman Will Hayes of the Republican National Committee at a gathering of the Program Committee at Washington. Soldier of the U.S. Army wig-wagging to the U.S. Army Transport Northern Pacific from the seawall. The steamer went on the rocks off San Juan, Puerto Rico a short time since. Lighters and tugs assisted her, and she will be floated. French-built Chalet Moudon dirigible that has been bought from the U.S. government by the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company of Akron, Ohio, for the establishment of the first intercity airship line. It will start this fall, making daily round trips between Akron and Detroit, carrying mail and express. The distance is about 150 miles each way. Later on, passengers may be carried. The airship is 260 feet long and has two motors of 250 horsepower each. Simple but effective device used in Philadelphia to permit trolleys and other vehicles to keep going during a fire. The hose is stretched over two temporary platforms, keeping the street clear and preventing congestion of traffic. Ireland is still seething with revolt, and outbreaks are of almost daily occurrence. Police barracks have been attacked in various parts of the country. Income tax offices have been invaded and the papers burned, and cattle have been driven from the farms in the rural districts. The offer of home rule that has been made by the British Parliament has not proved satisfactory to any section of public opinion. In Londonderry, there have been serious riots between the Orangemen and the Sinn Féiners, and many deaths and woundings have resulted. The British government has transported large bodies of troops to Ireland, and it is reported that blockhouses are to be erected and large areas fenced off as a measure to keep the population in check. Photo caption: Cavalry forces arriving in Ireland from England. It is announced that large numbers of troops have been dispatched to maintain order. Police barracks at Rush, Ireland that were recently attacked by a mob of between 50 and 100 armed raiders. They blocked the surrounding roads with trees and cut all telegraph and telephone wires. The walls were pitted with bullets. The attack was repulsed. One man was wounded. Armored car used by a British detachment in bringing army pay from the Bank of Ireland. The men are as fully equipped as though they were going into battle. The situation has become so grave that only the most rigorous methods keep it under control. Japanese high school students in a hotly contested game between rival schools giving their school cheer to urge their comrades on to victory. The cheerleader is an established institution in this country, and one of the most interesting features of the games between schools and colleges has been the energy, almost frenzy, put into his efforts. The Japanese cheerleader here shown is not behind his American model and activity. Traffic policeman on Ginza Street, Tokyo, which from its extensive traffic is known as the Broadway of Japan. In addition to the men themselves, the signal shown in the picture is used to warn vehicles. The interesting feature is the word stop in English. It indicates how rapidly the English language is becoming almost an international one all over the world. Girls of the Atomi School in Tokyo, which numbers 600 students, going through a system of calisthenics under the direction of Professor Tazawa. About the gymnasium are grouped the parents and friends of the pupils. Physical training is being extended very rapidly through the Japanese schools, and the most approved methods of America are being adopted under the tuition of competent instructors. Girls as well as boys are given a thorough course of training. Horses are here shown being assembled at the Friedrichsfelde near Berlin for delivery to the Entente nations in compensation for stock taken from France and Belgium. Calves that have been rejected by the Entente Commission as not being up to the standard required. Every animal is scrutinized with great care, and only those are accepted that are free from defects and in perfect health. Members of the Entente Commission inspecting stock delivered up by the Germans to replace the depleted herds of the formerly occupied territories. The restoration of these or their equivalent was one of the important points in the Treaty of Versailles. Close-up view of the eyes of Babe Ruth that are one of his chief assets in making him the terrific batter that he is. Those keen eyes can time the speed and gauge the direction of the ball to the fraction of a second or an inch. The pitchers face him with fear and trembling, for there is no man in the league harder to deceive. Babe Ruth, whose real name is George H. Ruth, as he appeared at the Polo Grounds wearing for the first time the uniform of the New York Yankees, who purchased the right to his services from the Boston Red Sox for the unprecedented sum of $125,000. The additional crowds that his name will draw to the games will soon make up that sum. Ruth in position to follow his favorite sport of putting the ball over the fence. Last season, he made 29 home runs, which no other player approached. He is the hardest hitter that has ever been in the game, though admirers of Ed Delahanty of the Phillies may question the claim. He has made 6 home runs so far this season, the last one just after coming from a sickbed. Last photograph taken of the late President Carranza, marked with cross, taken just before the Battle of Rinconado. He is talking with General Murguia. Alvaro Obregón, chief figure in the Mexican Revolution, whose appearance has been changed by the growth of whiskers, but whose missing arm identifies him. The picture was taken at his headquarters in Tacubaya, where he was interviewed by American newspapermen. Excited crowds of Mexicans filling Zocalo Square in Mexico City, cheering the success of the revolutionists in taking the capital. Ringing the chimes of victory at the cathedral in the Mexican capital after the entry of General Obregón at the head of the revolutionary forces. Obregón's troops passing through the Plaza de la Constitución, one of the main squares of Mexico City. The city was taken without bloodshed, as the federal troops had made good their retreat. The revolutionary troops were received with a welcome that testified how deep had been the dissatisfaction with the recent actions of the Carranza government. The Obregón temporary government assumed control, and there was no disorder. Part of the presidential train wrecked at the Battle of Rinconado. Trains bearing Carranza and his adherents being prepared for defense at the Battle of Rinconado, which resulted in a defeat for the president's forces. Typical soldiers in Obregón's Army of Occupation of Mexico City. They were snapshotted on their entry into the capital. They are of the Rough Rider type, in the uniforms that have usually associated with rebel forces. The 56th Battalion of Obregón's army arriving in Veracruz from Jalapa after clearing the intervening territory of those who still adhered to Carranza's fortunes. It is interesting to note that the wives of soldiers accompanied the troops in their customary way, preparing the meals on the tops of the cars, and otherwise attending to the comforts of the men. Polish-American troops arriving in New York on the U.S. transport Princess Matoyka, May 23, 1920. They had enlisted in the Polish army to fight the Bolsheviks after the armistice had been declared. Many of the men had seen hard service on the Western Front, and after the declaration of the armistice, had gone to Poland to protect that country against the Bolshevist troops that were menacing her frontier. The men were sent to Camp Dix, New Jersey for demobilization. Chinese pilgrim on a ledge of branches laid on posts and guarding against slipping by holding to a chain along the face of the cliff. Below him, the cliff falls sheer for 1,500 feet. He is going to a small temple cut out of the rock. If he reaches it, his courage absolves him from other religious obligations. Huge Coliseum building at Chicago, where the Republican National Convention is to be held beginning June 8, 1920. The flags are already in place, and seats are being constructed for the 13,250 people who are expected to fill the building. Exterior view of the Colosseum, where the representatives of the Republican Party will meet on June 8, 1920 to select a candidate for President of the United States. The portal decorated with flags and shields is the main entrance. From 4 days to a week will probably be required to adopt a platform and determine upon the nominee. Smallest dirigible in the world leaving the ground for her maiden flight over Los Angeles, California. The trip was a successful one, and the Pony Blimp, as she is named, fully met the expectations of her constructors. The little aircraft is 95 feet long and has a 3-cylinder motor capable of propelling the dirigible at the rate of from 40 to 60 miles an hour. She can carry enough fuel for a continuous flight of 8 hours. 2 passengers and the pilot can be carried in the underbody. Close-up view of the same tiny dirigible shown in the preceding picture. The machinery is of the most approved pattern, and it worked admirably in the initial flight of the craft. While hardly large enough for more than sporting purposes, its lightness and speed would make it extremely useful in time of war. Leaping from a racing automobile and catching at a rope ladder suspended from an airplane. The theory of the stunt had been figured out, but the execution was defective, because the airplane was making 90 miles an hour to the car's 70. This jerked Panghorn loose from the ladder, and he rolled on the sand at San Diego, California. Fortunately, he was not injured. Secretary of the Navy Daniels making an address in tribute to 153 dead officers and men of the Navy and Marine Corps on the pier at 35th Street, Brooklyn, where the bodies of the dead were placed on the arrival of the steamer Nereus, May 20th, 1920. The bodies had been exhumed from military cemeteries at Brest, Nice, and Marseille. Graves of 2 Americans, Dr. J.R. Armstrong and W. Stowell, at Elizabethwell, Africa. They were killed in a train accident while taking pictures for Universal Film Company in connection with the Smithsonian Institution expedition. Ruins of one of the stores of Scranton, Pennsylvania, wrecked by a gas explosion. The city is a great coal center, and it is alleged that excessive taking of coal from beneath the town has caused the streets in some quarters to sink, owing to insufficient propping and support. Gas mains have burst and explosions have resulted. The independence of Armenia has been decided upon by the Peace Conference, an action that has long been foreshadowed. It was unthinkable that forlorn and outraged country should be left any longer beneath the cruel dominion of the Turk. The boundaries of the new republic have not yet been determined, but President Wilson has been asked to define them and has accepted the task. Access is provided for Armenia to the sea. A mandate over Armenia has been offered to the United States by the Allied nations, who point out that no other power could be credited with such disinterested motives as our own. The President has referred the matter to Congress, with a message recommending that the mandate be accepted. The matter has not yet been taken up by that body, but all the indications are that the mandate will be refused. The distance of Armenia from our shores, the expenditure of money, and to some extent of life that would be involved are pointed to by those who are opposed to the proposition. The matter is not a party one, as some leading supporters of the administration, notably Senator Hitchcock, have indicated their opposition to the measure. Photo caption: Citadel of Adana, a town on the right bank of the Sihun, 528 miles southeast of Constantinople. Armenian woman spinning wool with the primitive wheel that has been in use for ages in that far-off country. Peasant lads on a country road leading a donkey, laden with brush and branches gathered for fuel. Buffalo carts in the outskirts of an Armenian town. The animals who draw them are getting their midday meal. The vehicles are of the simplest and rudest type. New Armenian army crossing the river Aras and entering Yerevan, which has been fixed upon as capital of the Armenian Republic. The army has been equipped largely through Allied aid. The Armenians have fought extensively in the war, chiefly on the side of the Allies, from whom alone could they expect rescue from Turkish cruelty and oppression. Some were drafted against their will into the Turkish army and sent to the most exposed fronts to be decimated. Merchandise for sale in street of an Armenian village. Brush market in the town of Aintab. Fuel is scarce on the Armenian plains, and the brush is in demand. Armenian girl of the more prosperous type, of whom few are left in that desolate and stricken country. The more common type of Armenian peasant woman, such as were driven by thousands into the desert to die. Armenian beggar soliciting alms. Begging is a profession which has many members in all the countries of the Orient. Present-day scene in the marketplace of Péronne, France. This typical little French town was nearly wiped out by the battles fought in its vicinity that will go down in history as the battles of the Somme. With the final retreat of the Germans in 1918, the former population returned to take up the tasks of daily life. They found the place a pile of ruins, in some cases even the streets being unable to be detected beneath the masses of debris. Soon, little huts built from the nearest materials at hand sprang up. The above photograph shows the temporary dwelling of a family on the site of their former home. The beautiful Gothic city hall at Saint-Quentin, France, which suffered terribly in the battles that raged about the city during the advance and retreat of the German forces. Of particular value was the facade, with its perfect Gothic ornaments. It is now being restored to its original beauty. It took nearly 200 years in building and was rivaled only by the Cathedral of St. Quentin, which also suffered greatly. Historic Hotel du Coq Hardy at Verdun, as it is today. This city will be forever memorable for the heroic defense against the armies of the German Crown Prince. For many months, the struggle continued, but the Germans did not pass. The photograph shows beams shoring up buildings that threaten to fall. Special efforts are being made to restore the town as a perpetual memorial to the glory of French arms. Market Square at Ypres, Belgium, near the melancholy ruins of the Cloth Hall, while a cattle show was in progress. Belgian royalty was in attendance. The show was designed to stimulate cattle breeding and thus help to revive prosperity. Cattle show in full swing in the market square at Ypres, May 8, 1920. Even among the ruins, the indomitable spirit of the Belgians is shown by this evidence of business energy. Many of the cattle were those restored by Germany in accordance with the peace treaty. Large number of German guns captured by the Americans on the battlefields of France and Belgium, and now stored at the Port Newark, New Jersey naval base. They are designed for distribution among the 48 states of the Union as memorials of America's victorious participation in the war. They will be set up in the parks or squares of capital cities. King Albert and Queen Elizabeth of Belgium immediately after alighting from an airplane in which they made a flight from Belgium to England. They landed at Farnborough after a successful trip. The occasion of their visit was the wedding of Mr. Oswald Hesley, Member of Parliament, to Lady Cynthia Curzon. Professor Charles Marvin, chief of the U.S. Weather Bureau, examining a new self-recording weather-observing instrument called a meteorograph, his own invention. It is attached to kites and sent into the upper air to record the conditions that prevail at various altitudes. 10 kites are often operated at one time. Finish of the Metropolitan Handicap at the opening of the season at Belmont Park, New York, May 24, 1920. Wild Air is winning with Thunderclap second, and On Watch third. It was only the second time that this historic feature had been won by a 3-year-old. The victory was an impressive one by 3 lengths. Joan of Arc celebration held at Orléans, the city memorable for the victory of the heroic maid who delivered it from the power of the English. French troops are grouped about the statue in the principal square of the city. Marshal Foch was present. Conversion of British gunboats into cargo steamers, illustrating the rapid transition from war to peace. 8 vessels are involved in the process. The work is being carried on in compliance with the British Corporation rules, and the work includes the straightening of the stem, the boats are double-enders, and the building of a forecastle. The depletion of world's shipping caused by the depredations of the submarines makes it necessary for the loss to be made up in the quickest way possible.